Hey, how's it going today?
Good afternoon, Ed. Going fairly well today. No complaints. Decent work. Weather's a little bit crummy. You got some rain coming down on me, but no complaints. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Yep, just hanging here right now, ready to enjoy the spaces.
Hi, can anybody hear me?
I can hear
Yes,
you.
I got you, Matthew. Can you hear us?
I don't think he can hear us. I
I
can
don't
hear
think
him
he can
though.
hear us. I'll just message him quickly here.
I see we got a Bitcoin rebound. Price is going back up after that little dip we took. All good things there.
And just as quickly going back down again. I don't know if you looked in the last hour.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Of course it did. I check a few times a day, and that's about it. And the last few days, if you do that, you could see any number of things.
Oh yeah.
I love that the mempool is like still so cheap, though. I think that's the best part of all of it.
Yeah. Good time to consolidate.
Yes, we were talking about that on Monday as well. It's a good time for some UTXO consolidation.
Well, I may be mostly listening today, everybody. I'm hanging out with my son, so just saying hi. But if you have a specific question, feel free to let me know.
Do you have any interesting acting gigs coming up?
I shot a Party City commercial with my two kids about a month ago, so that should air in September, and it's for Halloween. And then this weekend, I'm reprising my role for Visit Myrtle Beach Tourism, where I just kind of play this Sports Center style anchor who's kind of an idiot talking about all the great things at Myrtle Beach.
Oh, that's awesome, Gary. I imagine that doing a shoot with your kids was either very frustrating or a lot of fun.
My daughter, she's 8, and she kind of took to it very well. She really enjoyed it. And my son, he just wasn't that into it. He just kind of was there and hung out. And it's not something that I've ever tried to pressure my kids to do. I just saw the audition a while back, and they were looking for a couple kids to audition, with the parent. And I said, oh, I got a couple kids around the right age. You kids want to audition? And they said, yeah, my daughter's enthusiastic. She always is. And my son is kind of 50-50. Sometimes he'll say yes, something like that. Sometimes no. But it's nothing that I ever press them on. I'm not trying to make them actors or anything. If that's something they want to pursue, that's fine. And if not, that's totally fine too. It's not necessarily the best career path anyway.
100%. Matthew, can
That's
you hear
awesome.
us? Is it working yet?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can,
Yes.
sir. I can.
Oh,
Thank you so much for
beautiful.
joining us today.
Hey, man,
Welcome,
thanks
Matt.
for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
Welcome.
I am thrilled to have you on today. I'm very excited for this chat. I'm not sure where things will go, but I'm on chapter 11 currently. Just kind of to get things kicked off and going here, Matt, I was actually curious because in some of the podcasts and things I've heard, you talked about you were reading the Bitcoin Standard, which kind of started this journey for fiat food. But I don't think I've heard you talk about what brought you to Bitcoin in the first place.
I think COVID just changed my view of everything. I've always been naturally cynical. I was an investigative crime reporter for nearly 2 decades. So cynicism was part of my DNA. But COVID and the hysteria surrounding it, and particularly the propaganda we were being fed, shifted me in a different direction that led me to question everything, which led me to Bitcoin and safety.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I can definitely empathize with the effect of the lockdowns and everything that happened during COVID for just kind of, taking the mask off or the reality of the state kind of behind the scenes there. I'm curious for you. I don't recall whereabouts in the states you are, but was it a shared experience with you and your family? Were they kind of seeing things the same? Were you kind of feeling out on your own at this point in time, like a lot of us were?
It was a shared experience to a degree, but I also go down rabbit holes, and I think I exhaust everybody in my family. I have 4 daughters and a wife who have to listen to me speak about seed oils for 20 minutes every morning sometimes, and I think it could be a little exhausting, but they in time understood why this was important, the evidence behind it, and as a result we've all switched our diets. I was just speaking to a friend of mine, Dr. Mary Bowden. Some of your audience might know who she is, and she recently went carnivore. And I was just explaining it's like once you really see what has happened, you can't unsee it. It's impossible, and there's no going back.
Oh, I completely agree, 100%. And the implications are just unbelievable. And I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more about what even switching your diet's been like for you and your family and what you've seen. And for me personally, I did it back in October and have seen just incredible results. Weight melted off me and I never felt better. And even just recently, you try to tell people and share these ideas and thoughts. And I had an old friend from work that I ran into after years, and he'd put on a lot of weight and he'd actually become diabetic. He got up to about 220 or so. And, a lot of times when I talk about Bitcoin or, fiat food or anything of these lines, you kind of get dismissed. Not everybody's necessarily ready to listen, but I got the best text I've ever seen in a long time. We had a great conversation, and about 10 days later, he texted me to thank me because he was already down over 10 pounds. He immediately started trying it that day and is already seeing improvements in his health.
Wow. Well, congratulations on making that switch. For me, I'm a writer. I don't have people calling me up telling me they want to give me money. So I have to generate ideas to feed my family. And it's a pretty pressure intensive role I play in my household. And one thing that I noticed early on is if I'm eating a lot of plant garbage, I'm just not as productive. So say I make a kick-ass pizza, say I devour half of that. I need to basically take 2 hours off of my day where I'm unproductive. I'm watching television. I'm just sort of in a vegetative state. So when I knew for years that when I needed to really push, when I had a book due or an article due or a magazine feature due, I needed to essentially fast. And my mind worked much better, because I didn't have hours of the day to waste. When I began doing the research and was exposed to Seyfedin Ammous's work in the Fiat standard, he has a chapter on this, I began testing it on myself. Like what would this carnivore diet do for me? It sounds completely insane and it defies logic based on what we've been told for generations. And what I found was it was the most amazing life hack, because for a writer, my ability to retain information and transfer notes, which I'm sure others in this audience are writing too, it's a pretty big deal and it's cost intensive with time. I was able to do that at a much quicker rate. And as a result, my productivity would go up. So now I'm about 2 years in. I run every morning. I have a basketball tournament at my house with a bunch of teenage kids who push me around every Saturday. And I'm able to produce writing, and in particular, my next book project that I'm working on now, everything's just streamlined. In addition to that, my mood is also balanced. I've never been an overly emotional guy, but with 4 daughters, 2 of them being teenagers, it could be trying to maintain your emotional stability. But I'm not on that roller coaster anymore where I'm going from sugar high to crash to sugar high to crash. And I think it's just made my entire life better. It's hard to overstate it. I know this sounds hyperbolic, but for me, it's been everything.
I completely agree. And I empathize so much with your story there as well, too. For me personally, my wife has always had issues, had health problems, and I had talked about this, but she was, very apprehensive and didn't necessarily believe it would work or that it even be feasible or that she could do it. So me starting going full carnivore was actually just kind of as an experiment, as like a case study, as a proof of concept. And so I did it just to show like, no, we can do this. I can show you how we can do it. I'll take the lead and I'll start. And I couldn't believe, to your point about mood, and for me, it was kind of energy levels. I used to struggle to stay awake on the ride home. I'd be driving home and I could feel myself just kind of dozing off and losing focus. And the mental clarity I got by cutting out all that garbage, I never want to go back. Ben, I know that you've been doing some working out, and I think you've been changing your diet a little bit recently too. Have you been experimenting with anything like this?
Hey guys, thanks for having me up. I'm kind of on the road in Tofino right now, but I had to come in because I have, number one, Matthew, I have to say that thank you so much for writing this book, because I would put this book on par with some of the most mind-boggling reads that I've had over the past decade. It felt like the aha moments that you encounter when you're discovering Bitcoin, but for our entire food system. And it has been so impactful because I've struggled with kind of refining my diet and trying to get the garbage out of it, and trying to get rid of that bloated garbage feeling that I get after meals and everything. And funny enough, part of the reason that I'm having an easier time doing that now since reading the book, I've always known that, oh, you know, certain things, oh, maybe I shouldn't be eating this, or if I feel like crap when I eat this and everything. Part of it is having gone through the book and seen how much the incentives were aligned as such that you just get taken for a ride by our existing infrastructure and the food systems that have developed. And some of it is, to a degree, malice, or at least it is done through a mechanism to prevent the fallout of the fiat system itself. There's certain things, like part of in your book where you talk about how there's studies of people are more than happy to endure, not more than happy, but they will endure inflation in certain things. But as soon as it hits the food, then that's where revolutions occur. And so, you know, a lot of this came about as a mechanism to prevent inflation in food, or at least, you know, it can be reasoned that it did. And so for me, it sounds silly, but part of the reason why it's easier for me to grapple with this and change my habits is because I'm actually mad when I go and I get, you know, this food that you grow an addiction to, and I hate that they've got me, right? I hate picking up a piece of food and say, oh yeah, they got me on this one. I have this disdain for it, and so I want to fight against it even more. And in making those changes and cutting things out, like once you get past that hurdle of addiction, once you kind of get into this area where you're like, okay, I've gotten through the intense desire to have these certain things. Once you get past that moment, the mental clarity, the lack of, again, for me, it's always like a stomach bloating, just awful feel after finishing a meal. I don't get that anymore. And I just feel so much better when I'm on that right track. So again, I know that I'm kind of all over the map here in what I'm chatting about, but I will say that this book has meaningfully changed the way that I look at food and how I cater my day-to-day life, and I'm navigating it because I travel a lot, and it can be difficult to navigate, but it's huge. And the other thing I'll say is I'm super glad that you grabbed TC up here, because TC has made leaps and strides and bounds in regards to his changes in his diet too. And we were on a show together just a couple weeks ago talking about your book and how life-changing it is. So Matthew, thank you so much. I'd love to have you on a Friday show sometime if you're ever game.
Oh, wow. I'm honored and thank you. When I began writing this book, I published with major publishers, Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, Scholastic. And when I embarked on this project, I knew that no major publishing house would take it. And I knew that there was a chance that it's such a niche topic that nobody would really even read it. I had to come to terms with that possibility. But I thought I have 4 kids, and I just felt it was really, really important to get this out there for them to one day read when they're a little bit older, perhaps. So it's really gratifying to hear that. I'm shocked by its success, to be honest with you. I thought there was a chance it would do okay, but it's really exploded. We're doing translations in already one in Polish, Danish is coming, I think Taiwan. So man, I'm just very humbled, and thank you. I'd love to come on your show anytime.
Awesome. I do have to jump because I'm just out for a family meal, but I had to, I saw the space happening and I was happy that everybody with Bitcoin Mentor was having you up. So I had to come say hey and again, give you a huge tip of the hat for your writings. Anybody that's listening right now, immediately go buy this book. It is mind bending, and when you try to tell people about it, you sound like an absolute quack. But Matthew has been an investigative journalist for 20 years, and this is his specialty, is exposing corruption, and he has done that to the utmost degree. So thank you very much, and please do chat with TC here because he's been making major changes as well. So anyways, guys, I gotta jump. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
It's good to see you for half a second.
I just wanted to add on to what Ben was saying, because he brought up something that I had a personal experience with not too long ago. In the grocery store, I'm looking around, I'm like, let's get some frozen sausage patties and look at the ingredients. And I kid you not, the second ingredient is soy protein, and then there's seed oils right after that. And I'm like, it's literally just, it's just meat. Like, why are they putting this stuff in it? You know, it kind of just blows my mind how they really do get you. You know, you think, you're like, oh yeah, it's a turkey sausage. What can go wrong here? Until you read the ingredient list on the back, and then you wonder, how many other things have I been buying all these years that they've just put these fake ingredients in, and all these harmful things that humans shouldn't be eating, and it's just really mind blowing. But I do want to welcome TC up here, and I also want to shout out to the audience. If anyone has any questions or just wants to talk about Bitcoin with us, please come up, and I'll leave it to the rest of you guys to continue the conversation real quick.
Oh man, I'm blown away. I feel like I just I just hit a jackpot or something. I had no idea that you guys had Matthew in here. Matthew, I am a massive fan. You might have seen me tweeting about your book. I read it just a couple months ago, and it was a game changer for me. It's so eye-opening. I have been shilling that book to everyone who will listen to me for more than 5 seconds. It's funny because I started carnivore diet almost a year ago. I'm at 10.5 months right now. It's been a transformational thing for me. And I started that as a attempt to kind of do something about long-term health. I'm in my mid-40s, and I have kids and a family, and it's just that time of life when these longer-term kind of implications of everything come into greater focus and come into more meaningful context. And health is not something that I take for granted, and yet, like many Americans, I have been in less than ideal health, and living with less than ideal habits for most of my adult life. And I had sort of I had a back surgery about 5 years ago, and this is a typical thing for people, especially like post surgery. You find a way to like make these excuses for yourself. You kind of, allow yourself more slack than you need. And I got really out of shape as a result of that. And, so when I saw all these Bitcoiners talking about carnivore diet, it really started kind of turning into something that I was interested in. I think one of the catalysts was Max DeMarco's video about carnivore. I watched that and I was like, okay, fuck it. I'm going to just try 30 days and see what happens. And that was the first month of what is now almost a year. Reading your book really just kind of confirmed everything that I've been experiencing just firsthand in terms of removing all of this stuff from my diet. And it's like at this point that I realize, just as much, if not more important than what you do eat on a carnivore diet, it's what you're not eating. And it's a huge revelation for me to kind of put it together from that point of view, as far as, I may not stick to strict carnivore long term, but I cannot imagine myself going back to eating some of the junk food, processed food. It's basically sugar, processed grains, all of those vegetable oils, seed oils, like all that stuff that's just kind of in all the food. I've basically experienced now close to a year of what life is like not putting those things in my body, and it's just transformational. There's no other word for it. The sort of like fitness and health benefits. I mean, I lost like 55 pounds. I sleep better. I've got better focus. I never really thought I had a problem with alcohol, but just not having even a sip of alcohol for this last year, it's just kind of clarifying. And all of these things together are really a whole new outlook for the rest of my life. The information in the book is jaw-dropping when you really are just objective about it. It's nothing short of just shocking the degree to which the food has been corrupted. And a lot of the stuff, I think it reads so easily and so well and so fast. I finished that book in 2 days. I basically took a flight that was 5 hours. I read half the book on the flight there. And then a few days later, I was flying back home, finished the second half of the book. It's one of these books you can just gobble up, no pun intended. It reads really quick, and it's just full of stunning revelations about people, about organizations, about the timelines, about changes that occurred in society's outlook about food. And what's amazing to me is, I mean, I'm just old enough to remember being a kid in the 80s and, seeing some of these changes come through. I remember the obsession with fat free that just kind of stormed society in the 80s. And, and a lot of these things just resonate with me just from, anecdotal personal experience. But overall, reading that book and then going through the, change in what I've been putting in my body for now almost a year, it's hard to really communicate how significant and how positive it is. But I mean, I won't shut up about this to like anybody I know. I feel like this is like the whole second sort of rabbit hole after the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And I'm going through this experience of like, talking to people about it and getting a lot of weird looks the same way when you talk to people about Bitcoin, because they're not ready for the truth. They're not ready for the discipline that's required to just take those entire classes of food and just omit them and just not put that shit in your body. And so many people are basically like addicted to these horrible, unhealthy things. And so it's a real exciting thing. It's intellectually stimulating. It's a whole nother level of impact on you when you change your health, because that it impacts just every moment of your waking life, more so than just the intellectual stuff that goes on with Bitcoin. Like there's these sort of, physical and biological processes that are changing as a result of me controlling what I'm eating. And it's just, I don't know, it's an incredible thing. So I just can't thank you enough for writing the book. I'm recommending it to as many people as I can. I think I'm probably responsible for at least 5 or 6 more book sales because I've gotten a lot of people to get it and read it. And yeah, man, cheers to you.
Wow. Thank you, TC. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. You touch on something that became horrifyingly evident to me in my research for this book, which is that we're being lied to. We've been lied to for about 55 years. This has been a huge gaslighting campaign to rearrange our diet. So what you're doing now isn't it. I know I can feel the frustration in your voice when you try describing to other people your dietary habits and they act as though you're on some kind of fad. But in the line of history, TC, what you see is that the way you're eating now is the way people have been eating for thousands of years, up until approximately 1971. What happened in 1971? August 15th, Richard Nixon decoupled from gold in a speech known as the Nixon shock. Inflation became a remarkably prevalent issue, especially in the early 70s and leading up to today. So the entire food supply had to be altered to keep people from really understanding the true consequences of monetary inflation. And that's what we're seeing today. So it's not as if our leaders and our authorities have a neutral stance on this. I don't think I've found no evidence that they are actively trying to make us sick. But what is clear is that the data is out there. They understand that, for instance, the 1992 food pyramid, which recommended 8 to 12 helpings of grains every day, was a recipe for metabolic destruction. Like, that was known through the work of many others, including Winston Price and studies of the Maasai and studies on groups in Alaska who sustained themselves in very healthy lifestyles with primarily carnivore diet. So you're right. It's difficult, but congrats to you for making this change. And I mean, I really look at it more as a return to just natural living, part of an overall lifestyle switch where you're opting out of this 55-year psyop in the making and trying to regain self-autonomy. No longer, one of the best things about COVID, and obviously there weren't a lot of great things about COVID, but one of the best things that I saw was that a lot of people who were maybe not overly skeptical, but a little bit skeptical, got pushed over the edge, and they're no longer outsourcing their decision-making to authority.
Thank God.
Yeah, instead, it's a return to self-autonomy, and people are really taking fresh looks at everything from the medicine we're taking to the food we're eating to the water we're drinking. And I think this is a very positive step, and it's not a coincidence to me that the Bitcoin community has latched onto this concept, because they've seen the distortions coming from authority for long before I have, to be honest with you. SAFE was so far ahead of the curve. And I just think I feel, that's why I feel a lot of hope for the future and hearing conversations like this.
I wanted to go ahead.
Go ahead, Vangel. I was going to say, after you, I see that Rico, you got your hand up there. We'll come to you afterwards. And Matthew, I completely agree and echo those sentiments. Vangel, go for it.
Yeah, well, one, I wanted to say, TC, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I wanted to also add one thing I learned is that when you look at those food products on those on the nutrition list, the ingredient list, what I found out was that the higher up to the top of the list an item is listed, the more of that is in the food. So I forgot who brought up that turkey sausage, but if you're seeing seed oil as the second ingredient or third ingredient, and then there's like 5 or 6, 7 other ingredients after it, that means seed oil is a bigger concentration of what's making that up than everything else below it. So it's mind-blowing if you look at something that's supposed to be meat and there's more seed oil than meat in it. That's really like shocking. And the other thing, TC, I also had a back injury prior to from weightlifting from weightlifting, and since I got into martial arts, which I've been doing the past 6-7 years, there's a lot of movement that has really helped me heal my body up. So if you're still experiencing some pain, I'd definitely like to work with you and show you some things. Hopefully you're not in any pain anymore and you don't need it, but if you're struggling with that, I'd love to offer some value there and help you out. And then lastly, I know someone has their hand up, but I was just going to encourage anyone to either share their own comments or questions they have for Matt. Don't be shy. Feel free to come up. I know one of you, I think it's Enjoy Polo. I happened to run into one of your posts, so I'm glad you made it online. So feel free to ask a question or give a comment. And I'm going to shut up now, and you guys take the floor.
Hey man, real quick. Thanks for offering help. I'm actually very fortunate. I had an excellent surgeon. I had a very successful surgery. That was actually part of the thing that was really bugging me, is that I let my condition kind of get bad, despite the fact I really just needed to kind of push myself harder on exercise and also obviously in retrospect the diet. And that's the thing. Honestly, like I found carnivore diet to be more catalyzing than anything else I've ever done in my adult life, as far as being able to kickstart a whole regimen of new, better habits. After about 3 months of carnivore, I started the 100 push-ups a day thing. I don't know if anybody's seen that. There's a bunch of Bitcoiners that started doing that. There's a few of us that are still doing it. Yesterday was day 194 for me. I have not missed a day. I've done at least 100 push-ups every single day. And there's no way in hell I could have done that with the extra pounds that were on me prior to the carnivore diet. So just doing that diet, even for a couple months, I lost enough weight to where I actually was able to start doing these push-ups and getting on this better regimen. And now I'm down to a weight I weigh less right now than I did when I was like 19 years old. It's wild. And I'm like getting in really, really good shape, and I feel really strong, and I'm not in pain. So I just wanted to let you know I'm not suffering from anything. In fact, quite the opposite.
Well, I'm happy to hear
That's
that.
awesome, TC.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that, because when I had my injury, I didn't realize how limiting like, you think it's just a lower back injury. You literally can't do anything. Getting out of bed, putting your shoes on, your quality of life is just horrendous. So I'm really happy for you, man. I'm glad that you're through it. And let's
Hey, Rico.
Pass the mic to Rico. What's going on?
Yeah, what's up? And that was a good conversation. Shout out to TC for that. Great. I'll have to go check out that book, Matthew. I was once a fitness trainer. I ran my own company and did massage, and it was more like just helping people in their lives. But that was a past life. But now I live on a farm, and we supply our own, vegetables and fruit and stuff. So, and somebody had said something about the medicine. I just wanted to pivot there because I actually went to school to be a nurse, and I dropped out because after doing like an internship at an institute, one of the top facilities in Oregon, OHSU, I couldn't just watching what was like the stuff they were putting in the food at the hospitals, and it's just the chemicals on the labels. I mean, just so the medicine, there's a reason why, like, the food is the medicine. I'll just get TLDR. The food is the medicine. You don't need, in a sense, this ideal medicine of pharmaceuticals are petroleum based. There's a reason why there's a lot of issues with our society, because at the chemical level, they're not being supplied with the right things with their bodies. They're saying the wrong thing. And so, yeah, I shout out. That's awesome for everybody who's taking responsibility. And it's like you take responsibility for your diet because you care about your time. You want your preference of life to exist longer. And you want to be able to not have to, like, in a sense, have to take some kind of care to, from somebody else, like a middleman, a hospital. There's a reason why their insulin prices are so high. I mean, they want people, in a sense, just chemically just messed up as the system is, that it's being run on them. So they will never be able to get the signal that they're being preyed upon and parasited. And there's a lot of things that we are unaware. Really quick, I'll shut up in a second. But these parasites living within us, they're living with these chemicals, and they're just, it's just terrible. This is going to come out very soon. You're going to hear a lot of stuff on parasites. But yeah, just good for you guys. And I just wanted to say that. Yeah.
Rico.
Awesome. Thank you, Rico.
I have a chapter in Fiat Food where I outlined some of the congruences between food and medicine and how they're remarkably intertwined. Just to give you one brief example, in January of 2023, the Tufts Food Compass was released. And the Tufts Food Compass is the preeminent dietary guidelines for America. It's established by these people who tout themselves as the who's who in nutrition policy. They spend years designing it. And in January of 2023, the Food Compass they released told us that Lucky Charms were healthier than red meat. Chocolate flavored soy milk was healthier than whole milk. And that Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal bars were healthier than eggs. That same exact month, 60 Minutes had a episode where they talked about a new weight loss shot. And the episode was sponsored by Novo Nordisk, the parent company Wegovy, I'm probably not saying that name correctly, the weight loss drug, and the only experts on were paid representatives from Novo Nordisk. And one of these paid representatives was somebody named Dr. Fatima Stanford, who I consider to be quite a despicable human being, because she posited in this quote-unquote news broadcast on 60 Minutes that obesity was not a lifestyle choice, that science has solved this, that it was an actual brain disease. And why I consider this woman vile, because obviously she knows the truth, but more importantly, she's undermining one of the core precepts that makes us human, which is our ability to control the most fundamental aspect of our existence, which is our health. And undermining it in such a sinister way where we no longer can control our health or our weight. So we need to outsource that information to white coats like her who are going to push these drugs. 2 months later, all in the same year, 2023, the American Pediatrics Association, for the first time, changed their guidelines to tell us that you could prescribe these weight loss drugs, and actually should, for children as young as 12. Now, I found in my research zero evidence that they polluted, that there was a meeting with smoky rooms and conspiratorial tones. But I mean, I think I'd have to be a little naive to think that there was no connection between these things, these very monumental things all happening in the span of 3 months. And it just makes you, it really makes you understand that the authorities in charge right now, they don't look at us as individuals where they're trying to facilitate health. It's more like we're means to an end. And the end is they profit from our misery, which is just the model we live in. I mean, it's a sad and disgusting thing to say. It sounds hyperbolic and insane, but if you really just unemotionally look at the evidence, there Novo Nordisk and 60 Minutes and the American Pediatric Association, who's funded by a lot of these drug companies, not a conspiracy, go on their website, they're listed as corporate sponsors, they're beholden to their shareholders and their board members, not to us. And as a result, you can look around and go to Walmart in any part of the country and look in line, and you'll see that we're sick. We're extremely sick. And the most dire effects we can see in the health of our children.
It makes me so mad. My kid is in elementary school. And by the way, Matthew, we got most of that. You were sort of in the matrix there for most of your time speaking just now.
Yeah, it wasn't just me.
But I got like 95% of it. The thing that pisses me off these days is I take my kid to school and you see some other children that are just disturbingly obese. And it's just something that doesn't sit well with me, because I look at the parents and I like get a clenched fist, because I'm just not okay with people treating their kids poorly. And this is a real societal problem, that adults don't have the information that they need to make healthy decisions. And on top of it, all the forces of Fiat are pushing them towards unhealthy choices. It's just absolutely despicable. In the book, you go through like a century of people and events and things happening where every single time it's not people's health that's prioritized. There's other motives, there's other incentives at play. And the fact that this translates into guidance for an entire nation, translates into the food that's fed to kids for breakfast at school. I mean, the whole thing about the milk, we can't have full fat milk. That fat isn't healthy. Let's go with low fat. And by the way, let's jam a bunch of sugar in there, because that's totally fine. It's just outrageous when you actually look at what's taken place. And I get to the point where, through this experience I've had in the last year, I've really gotten to the point where I don't allow myself to have any excuses. I only put good inputs in. And it's kind of like, would you just put like, you know, like sugar water into your car? You only put a certain type of fuel into your car. And it's like, I think of food the same way. I have to only put the inputs in that are going to be actually helping my health.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And
If I could just jump in really quick, that's the one reason I left America was because of the food. I lived in Portland. I grew up in a relatively place where you could choose anything you can find, because it's like obsessed with, all this natural stuff. And this is back in like 11 years ago. When I moved to Australia, I noticed the food, even though they had Coca-Cola and stuff like that. And by the way, for those of you who are drinking out of cans, please don't drink out of aluminum. Like aluminum's, get away from aluminum. It's like the god. Like, please get away from aluminum. But there's not a lot of ingredients that you can have outside of America that you guys are allowed to have. They pump that stuff in you. And the sugar and the low fat and all of this stuff, you need carbs, you need meat. Like there's just the right number. If you get it right, you need less than more protein. If you have too much of it, actually the parasites live off that stuff. But yeah, no, that's what made me get out of America. I'll shut up. But yeah.
Well, that was a great comment, because I think I've heard that there's, and I might be wrong on the number, but it was something like 192. Maybe Matt, you can verify. It's like 192 chemicals that we have in our food in America that is illegal in like Europe and most other places, which is a shocking number. Maybe it's not 192, but it was well over 100 of different things that we are allowed to put in the food here that it's illegal in almost every other country I've heard of. So, yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's a great point. Our regulatory process has been weaponized by industry. And we see this again and again. For instance, you ever wonder why there's such a war on raw milk? I mean, they really I've covered armed raids for the Epoch Times on a farmer in Pennsylvania, for instance, for selling raw milk. Armed raids with guns where they're seizing raw milk. They're not, of course they're not doing that because they're worried people are going to get sick by raw milk. That's of course not true. They're doing the work of the people who pay them, which is just the way human nature works. And if you go on the Department of Agriculture website and look at their parent companies, you'll see by 11-1, the funding is coming from large industry. And if you can treat your cows like shit and pump them full of hormones and get them to produce a bazillion floods of their milk, it's a higher profit margin. The competition from raw milk, where you need to keep your cattle healthy and in a good place, or else the milk is unusable. And farmers will tell you this. But you'll see the regulatory process through our agencies being weaponized. And Thomas Massey, a congressman, I've spoken to him at length about this. He's on the front lines trying to roll back a lot of these agencies to let consenting adults purchase nutrients that they need to thrive. But it's an uphill climb, because he explains to me that the groups he's up against are so well financed that what they do is they can take any message and they don't even have to make their message work. They just need to confuse and clutter the playing field so that you can't see clearly. And then we move on to the next.
I just want to add too, Matt, on that point.
Well said.
It was beautifully said. Like, no joke, in Canada, it is easier to get cocaine and heroin than it is to get raw milk. It is absolutely ridiculous. And one thing that we've been kind of touching on here that I think is actually really important that Ben brought up earlier is anger towards the system. When I was reading Fiat Food, and I'm almost all the way through it, I was getting increasingly pissed off with all the revelations that you had discovered, because I'd never felt more like cattle, like just some sort of livestock being controlled by somebody else. And I think that when we're looking for self-improvement, to take on responsibility, that anger can actually be a fantastic motivator to get things done. I'm curious, Matt, I know you had a couple examples here already, but were there any other situations or stories or things that you read in researching this that were just kind of like holy shit moments where it actually pissed you off?
Dude, I can't tell you enough how But one example that I'll mention to your readers is Ansel Keys, who came up with the diet heart hypothesis, which was this idea that saturated fat found in meat led to heart problems. He only had observational studies to verify his point. And not to get too in the weeds on this, but observational studies cannot establish causal relationships. They can only establish association. So essentially, if I take a poll of 100 cancer patients and 97 of them have at some point had milk, I can have an observational study linking to cancer. And out comes the headline. And that's how these studies are all marketing. That's what they are. They're based on observational studies. But Ansel Keys at some point got fed up with this. And he got a $200,000 grant from the government, which at the time in 1967 was quite a bit of money. And he got this money to conduct a actual double-blind clinical study. And in 1967, he initiated the Minnesota Coronary Survey. And what this survey did was it was spanned over tons of several nursing homes and I think even a mental institution. And it was able to control for variables because all the food coming in was controlled. They could see what everything people were eating. So this was actually really good science being done. 1971 rolls around, the study finishes, and there's no word about this study. No one's talking about the study. Nothing's released about the study. New York Times, who I've done work for, I got to admit they're a terrible newspaper at this point, but in 2014, they did some really great work because somebody at their paper began wondering, hey, whatever happened to that study I heard ended in 1971 that was supposed to put an end to the debate over saturated fats links to heart disease? They were able to find one of the lead researchers for this study, and they found out he was dead. They went to his son. His son was like, look, yeah, my dad's dead, but all of his research, it's in the basement of our house. So the Times sent their investigative team to go through these boxes. And what they found was shocking. What they found was that not only did Ansel Keys not prove the diet heart hypothesis, but lower cholesterol levels were associated with lower mortality rates. Higher cholesterol was ranked with, no, I'm sorry, I got that reversed. Higher cholesterol, the higher people's cholesterol was, the healthier they were. And the lower somebody's cholesterol was, the higher chance they had for coronary risk. And they, a science journalist, a really great one named Gary Taubes, asked one of the researchers who was still around, why didn't you come out with this information? Was there something wrong with the study? And the researcher answered, quote, there was nothing wrong with the study. We were just so disappointed in the results. Now, they knew in 1971 from the only study that ever had any validity, they knew that saturated fat found in meat did not cause heart attacks. They knew it. In fact, they knew that low-fat diets were unhealthy, but they were also dug in at that point that come 1980, we have the dietary food guidance, which said eat less meat, eat more grains. And then in 1992, they went full tilt. They basically said 8 to 11 servings of grains, a diet of complete metabolic dysfunction a day. Now, people are like, oh, this is just the government. It's just their guidance. Who cares? Well, if you grew up in the 90s, what you understand is, and went to public school, every single public school by law had to adhere to these guidelines. So out was the lard that fried our chicken nuggets replaced by seed oils. Out was the whole cheese, and the whole milk was replaced by some kind of low-fat blend that nobody drank. So they had to fill it with sugar, chocolate, or strawberry. By the time somebody comes out of high school in the 90s, early 2000s, they're already so metabolically compromised that they can't necessarily even think straight. Because look, I can't do well if I even have a toothache, much less if I'm 40 pounds overweight and my brain's all foggy from eating tons of Pop-Tarts, right? So yeah, I think we have reason to be angry. I mean, personally, I came out of the 90s and I had cancer. I had osteogenic sarcoma. I'm still in remission. And I don't think it was genetic. I think it was due to the intense amounts of toxins that I filled my body with. So anger, yeah, I mean, we've been wronged. I think that there's a place for that, and it's well served.
Wow,
that's unbelievable. Vandal, sorry, what were your thoughts there?
No, I was just blown away. I'll let anyone else comment, and then there's one thing I want to add. So go ahead.
No, it's just I've spent so much time around academia and things as well too. I don't think, and going back earlier in the conversation, the comments on COVID, I'm so glad to have that event. At least there's a silver lining, and your book, because I don't think people realize that, of course, the incentives apply to the white coats as well too. And it's so much of it, like you mentioned, it's just marketing meant to mislead and drive profits for somebody else.
Yep, and Matt, there's one comment in the thread that I wanted to just read out to you. Somebody's asking, have you ever considered reaching out to Joe Rogan and speaking on his podcast with what you've discovered through your research?
I would love to. If anybody knows how to get a hold of Joe Rogan, that'd be great. I am going on, I'm scheduled to appear on a very major podcast I'm not allowed to mention in October. But yeah, I'm pretty well connected in the political world, but with the new podcasting world, I'm still kind of a newbie. So I've not made Joe Rogan's acquaintance, but Joe, if you're listening, I'd love to talk.
Awesome.
We gotta meme that into reality.
Yes. And lastly, I just want to open the floor. Oh no, go ahead, Ed. Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead. Yeah, anyone that has any questions, wants to come up and chat with us, go right ahead. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Vangel?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it doesn't have to be food related. If you have a pressing question, you do have a lot of knowledge of Bitcoiners here with anything you need technically. Maybe you have a question about self-custody or inheritance planning or multi-sig or wanting to run your own node. Anything along those lines and more, any Bitcoin related question you have, feel free to come up and ask and get some help or get some insight from a bunch of very smart people.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to actually address the Bitcoin part real quick while we have you too. You mentioned earlier that sometimes looking at like everything going on in the food industry, it can seem like there's some kind of closed door conspiratorial effort to push this stuff on people, and I a lot of times just simply attribute it to money, and these companies are trying to squeeze their margins are thin and they're trying to get profits, and seed oils like canola oil, sunflower oil, these things are much cheaper than a natural occurring fat like lard or tallow. And I actually am a professional cook, and I have been for almost a decade now, and I see this day to day in my work life. And let me tell you, like in America, there's really no cooking establishment you walk into unless you're in a really niche section of the market that doesn't use these kinds of ingredients one way or another. They're offering tofu at the very least. Even if they have the burger on the menu, they have the tofu as an option, and people are disillusioned into thinking that it's the healthy choice. And I'm just curious if like you have any suggestions on maybe the Bitcoin aspect that I mentioned, or just what's a great. I mean, obviously recommending your book is one way to help people wake up to these kinds of things and learn about it. But if there's anything even more compact, like a really short form article or something you could recommend, I'd be happy to hear from you on that.
Yeah, thank you. I would recommend all of Saifedean Ammous's work, but more than anything, I appreciate people buying my book. You don't even have to do that. The best thing you could do to end the corruption is to buy Bitcoin. And let me explain why. The diet up until 1971, all these forces were still at play. There was a hardcore religious movement pushing the grain-based diet as a way to purify your soul. That's the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Corporations still made tons more money on plant-based products than meat. Yet still, in 1970, Americans, if they could afford it, ate meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And on average, 155 pounds of red meat, according to statistics dug up by Nina Teichels. What happened in 1971 when we had inflation due to uncoupling the United States dollar from gold, which first happened in 1917, but at least at that point, there was still a restraint on the amount of dollars they could print because foreign banks could still convert. But in 1971, nobody could convert. So the fiat printing press just went completely off the deep end. And you see at that point, and I did over 200 Freedom of Information Act requests to really like watch how this went down from a government vantage point, because this isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's a bipartisan gaslighting campaign, because you saw what happened, for instance, in Sri Lanka in 2022, when the price of meat and eggs and milk went up to astronomical highs, and they tore apart the government. So instead of coming to terms with the fact that the food and the nutrients that we're going to need for human existence is going to go up in price because there's a significant amount of dollars chasing them, they structured everything beginning in 1971 to feed more people. Because also keep in mind, there was a corresponding scare at the time. Now it's global warming. Back then it was overpopulation, specifically the theory that we were going to run out of food because people were overpopulated at an exponential rate, and that we shouldn't eat meat because it was too resource intensive. So that was at the time, that was their push for why we should stop eating meat and keep shifting. But if you're only eating Doritos, you don't notice monetary inflation. I have 4 daughters and a wife. If I could buy 6 boxes of cereal and feed everybody in a day, and truthfully, everybody would be full, 6 boxes of cereal. But in terms of the nutrients needed for humans to thrive, it's become absolutely cost prohibitive. And, you know, right now, red meat's increasingly becoming a food of the upper classes. Bitcoin ends this, because when you buy Bitcoin, every time you buy a Satoshi, you take a little jab at the Federal Reserve. And without the need to distort the food supply to accommodate and gaslight everybody for the monetary inflation that persists, if you strip the monetary inflation, there's no incentive for the government to jump into this arena. But it doesn't just have to be Bitcoin, although I think Bitcoin's the best one. I think any hard currency, and I list my reasons why I think it's superior to gold, but any hard currency that just prevents the government from printing all these dollars and the monetary inflation theft of citizenry that ensues would do the job. But it begins with the currency, because the whole reason and incentive for the government to gaslight us was to not let us see the true impact of the monetary inflation.
I completely agree, Matt. I do want to be respectful of your time. We are getting to the top of the hour, but before I let you go here as well, I did want to ask.
Do you guys have anything you wanted to say to that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me, Ed?
Yes.
Okay, well, hopefully somebody can hear me. Perfect. I just wanted to ask, you've taken on the food industry and the corruption there. I'm wondering
is Nathan talking right now? I can't hear anything.
I'm wondering which industry you're going to take on next. What is the next book going to be?
When I was writing Fiat Food, there were so many intertanglements with medicine, and I talked to Saif at great lengths about what the next book should be, and he agrees. We're jumping into the field of fiat medicine and the incentive process there. And I'm also working with I have a co-writer on this who is very experienced in this topic, and I'll let him announce himself when he's ready. But that should be coming out next year, late 2025.
Oh, that's very exciting to hear. Very exciting to hear. Vangel, if you can do me a favor, I'll pass the mic back over to Ed, and I will shut up now.
Well, my last thoughts, I wanted to add that I know that since COVID, the price of red meat in particular has, I think, tripled. I think it went from I think it was $12 or $13 to like 36 or something like that. I know it's been, which is one of the main reasons they don't do food inflation and the CPI. But also sometimes, Bitcoiners like to say Bitcoin fixes this, and to most no coiners, they listen to that like what is the association, and they just they just don't understand how basically what everything you just said, how with there's always an incentive to hide the inflation of food and direct people to other products to artificially reduce demand. All the little tricks that they try to do, as well as the things you mentioned earlier. Well, if you want to compete, if you try to be organic and you try to, feed your cows properly, the people who are feeding them cheaper, you know, hormone pumped food, they're going to outcompete you. And because the negative effects of the food don't manifest until years later, you see like a piece of beef that's like $5 and then another one that's 250. You're gonna go with the 250. You're gonna think, what's the difference? It tastes almost the same, not realizing the cascading effect that's going to affect you years down the line. And people follow incentives, and inflation unfortunately pushes people, squeezes them to have to look for cheaper and cheaper options. So and not even that, just what you said about Thomas Massey. How's he going to fight the people who can fund what they want to fund at infinitum by printing an infinite amount of money, where you have to fight with money you have to work for? So just the whole, when people say Bitcoin fixes this, sometimes it's very hard to wrap your head around. And there's so much work that goes into it, and you have made great strides where people can just read your book and kind of understand. So when somebody says Bitcoin fixes this, more people get it. And I just wanted to say thank you for the work that you did, and best of luck to you.
Oh, thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, great conversation today, and I really appreciate you coming on. I want to I know we had a lot of other people up here talking, but if there's anything that you want to just get out and maybe talk about before we wrap things up, I'd appreciate that.
I know in this community people get discouraged easy, and I understand, because a lot of these things we're talking about, writing Fiat Food was just a very dark time for me in many ways, because I grew up trusting a lot of these establishments in the 80s and the 90s as a child. Why would they lie about food? Like, why would they lie about what we should eat? That's insane. And when you find out that we've been lied to such an extent, and that what I would consider the most consequential conspiracy of our lifetime in terms of human health of our nation and our children, it takes you in a really dark place. But just a few years ago, we didn't have an off ramp, and today we do. And today we're starting to see there's so many people doing amazing work. It's like Tucker Carlson is slowly converting to this, and Joe Rogan is he's having carnivore. Dr. Sean Baker's been on, I think, twice. So because the media has transformed into this way where I'm able to be on your Q&A, one of my concerns when I did Fiat Food was I always have these huge publishing houses behind me. How do I get media? And I've been on Fox News and CNN and I've been on all these stations, and you get like 6 minutes to try to explain a very complicated subject sometimes. This new environment we're in is fucking awesome, where we can sit down for an hour and have an in-depth talk with just such great skeptical minds that are inquisitive, and we're all learning. It gives me a lot of hope, and the fact that we have Bitcoin that's accessible to everybody is an off-ramp. I mean, we can do this, and I feel good and just feel appreciative to have this venue to talk. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and honestly, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, these formats for conversation, I think, just vastly outperform something like a 30-second, 60-second soundbite that you get on a radio or the cable news. It's completely changing the game. People. I mean, some of the podcasts you can see go for hours and hours, and I listen to them, and so there's people out there that they really want this kind of content. They want to dig deep. They want to get down into the really little intricacies of every single topic that they're interested in, and giving that to people, I think, is a great way. And I really love doing the space because it also allows for that conversation for people that are listening. Someone can raise their hand, come up and talk, and you get a different pivot in the conversation that you wouldn't have had with just the guest and the interviewer. So I really appreciate everyone that came up to ask a question. Make sure you give those guys a follow, as well as Matthew. Give him a follow, and definitely check out the book, or even just listen to some of the podcasts he's been on, some of those long form conversations, because I've listened to those, and that is what got me into wanting to get the book and read it. And honestly, you get a lot of the information just from those conversations. So highly recommend. Go check that out if you haven't already.
And one last thing I'd like to add on top of that, please also follow the Bitcoin Mentor, the BTC Mentor, if you haven't. They put together these spaces. We want to get it out to as many people as possible. You know, imagine another 10,000 lives just listened to this conversation and thought, hey, maybe I should get Matt's book. One, that helps Matt do what he does and keep doing the work that he does for us. And, you know, 10,000 more lives could change. So, you know, that's why we're here. We're here to help people obviously custody Bitcoin, but more importantly, why? And that's because going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole will lead you to the success that you want in your own health, finances, everything else. So definitely please follow the BTC Mentor and help spread these spaces to as many people as you can.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to give everyone a quick reminder that we do the space every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern every time. And like I said, give these guys a follow if you haven't already, real important. And check out Bitcoin Mentor at bitcoinmentor.io, and you can email or book a free session with us and just learn about how we can help you, anything Bitcoin related. But I want to leave the floor to Matt real quick to close up with anything, and just say I appreciate you coming again.
Yeah, man. No, I'm good. Thank you for having me. Let's do this again.
Absolutely. I think that'd be great. I think there's plenty more things we could talk about and discuss if we did it again. So I'm totally open to that. Maybe we'll discuss that in the back.